And we're back on the boat today, this time for some engine work. A couple things that have been happening with the engine that I want to get fixed. Number one is we have a diesel leak, and I think I've pinpointed where that is. And number two, it's doing a weird thing where when you shut the engine off after running for a while, it will stop pumping cooling water through the system. So I'm trying to figure out both of those things. For the cooling water, the way the cooling water system works in here is you've got water that comes in from a seacock at the bottom of the boat along this pipe right here, or actually it's either one of those sides, to that thing right there. That thing right there is the strainer, and the strainer has a little filter in there so when water comes in, that it doesn't let seaweed and things like that go into the engine. So what's happening is I'll run the engine for a little while, turn it off, sail a little bit, turn the engine back on. This thing right here has a bunch of air in it and it won't let water come through. So it gets like airlocked or something. So trying to figure out where the air is coming from. I posted this on the Facebook group for the Yanmar engine, and everyone says, the majority of people say, you probably have a problem with the seal on this lid. So I'm going to check that out and see if the seal's there and maybe needs replaced. Second thing that could be happening is way up in the front there. If you follow that hose along there, it goes into the pump. So the pump is supposed to be self-priming, which means that if air got in it, I assume it would suck the air through and then suck the rest of the water through. So, but that might not be happening because maybe the pump is worn. So that's kind of like the second thing. Third possibility, according to the group on Facebook, is that somewhere along this line there could be a clog or a plug that's causing it to not draw enough water. So first thing I'm going to do, of course, the easiest one is take that off, take the seal off, and see if I have one. If I don't, I'm going to have to run to West Marine, see if I can buy a seal. Now this whole thing kind of, I think, started actually when I started playing with this thing because it was on there too tight a lot of times. And so I started keeping it a little loose. And I got two seals on here. There's one or two O-rings. There's one here and there's one here. They both, I guess, look like they're okay. I'm going to see if I know I have some extra O-rings around somewhere, so I'll see if I have the right size for this. And just go ahead and replace them anyway. I mean, this one here could be a little worn, the one on the bottom. That's probably the more important one. But either way, I'll see if I have those and just go ahead and replace them. Another thing you can do, somebody said they just put some grease on them, and then that solved their problem. So I may try that as well. So this is the cap. I can't quite tell what model this is. I can barely make it out, and just like searching those numbers that I can make out isn't helping. So because there are different sizes, it's a pretty standard cap, I think. So I should be able to find the O-rings. I pulled those off and kind of cleaned this up a bit. Now I want to come back here and clean these threads and the mating surfaces here where that goes. And then I'll put some grease on it and then start there, see how that works. I'm still going to run to West Marine and see if I can pick up some gaskets or some O-rings that look like they might be the same size. And then that way I have them in case this doesn't work. Okay, no luck at West Marine. They stock them, but they don't have any in stock right now. So they recommended checking the hardware store across the street that he said has a good selection of O-rings. So I'm gonna check that out, and if that doesn't work, I'll just grease these up and put them back in and then try to order some on their website. All right, some luck there. I was able to find the inner one, but not the outer one. So the smaller one. They didn't have the big outer O-ring. The biggest they had was 2-inch, and this one's at least like 2 1/4 or so. So I got a one to replace the inner, and I'll try that, and then I'll just order the correct set from West Marine. All right, so I went ahead and put that cap back on there. I didn't end up using the O-ring that I bought at the hardware store just because it was just a tiny bit too small, I think, or too loose up, as far as thickness goes. It was the right diameter, or close to the right diameter, maybe a little bit too big and then too small the other way. So I went ahead and put the others back on, put some grease around both sides. I also noticed I have this thing here, and this is it's a garden hose type fitting, so it's for flushing the system or filling antifreeze in the system to winterize. And it's got a little garden hose type cap on there. And the gasket to that was all crusty, so I threw a new one in because I have some of those on the boat. I'm gonna put that on and just see if that fixes it. It may have been this thing all along. Even though the O-rings for the strainer seem to be in good shape, they still were a little dry, so it's probably both a combination of that and maybe even this thing here. So I'll try that for now and then see what happens. I'll go ahead and order the O-rings for this on West Marine because they're only like a few dollars for both of those. So I'll order those. That way I have them, tighten this thing up, and then see what happens. So this is where I think I'm having a problem with my diesel. This is the fuel strainer. Before the fuel strainer, this thing in the back is the lift pump. So the lift pump takes the fuel from the tank and pulls it up to here, and then pushes it through here, and then from there it goes into a high pressure pump. The high pressure pump is what feeds it in, or feeds into the cylinders. But this thing here, I think, is leaking. And the way it works is like there are two parts. There's the top part and the bottom part. The bottom part's connected to the engine block, and there's a little lever that sits on a cam and activates the pump. And then the top part is where the fuel's pumped through. And there's a diaphragm right here where my finger is that separates the two. There's a few screws in here, and I noticed this last time. It looked like I thought it was leaking from the diaphragm, but it doesn't look like fuel is getting into the oil. It looks like it's just coming out. So I put a screwdriver. It's kind of a tight fit, but I put a screwdriver on those screws and tightened them up. And that seems to have like stopped most of the leak. You can see down the bottom there, I've been putting a doggy training pad thing on there to pick up the fuel that leaks down there. There's not a lot on it today from the last time we went out. So that's pretty good, I think. But I think it still needs to come off because you don't want this diaphragm here failing and then diesel fuel getting mixed in with the oil in the engine. So I'm going to take that off, I think. My problem right now is if I take it off, I'm not going to be able to get a replacement right away because Bayshore Marine, where I usually get my Yanmar parts, is closed on the weekends. So I wouldn't be able to get there until the week. I could order it online, but then it's going to take still a few days plus to get here. So I'm going to kind of look at this and try to make a decision on what I'm going to do with it. And I've come up with a somewhat temporary solution to the fuel leak. So this is the back side of the engine. The lift pump is right back in there. And last time I was working on the other side from the front up there, and I was able to tighten up. There are 4 Phillips head bolts that go around that hold it together, that hold the diaphragm inside the 2 halves of it. And I was able to get a screwdriver on the outside of the engine, and I couldn't reach the inside of the engine, and all those screws were loose. So I went ahead and tightened those up, and that solved most of the problem. But I couldn't get these back ones until I realized just now that I can actually get at least one of them from the backside. So I was able to tighten up 3 of the 4 screws that go around the pump, and we'll see how that does. I need to get to the 4th one. I need a small 90-degree screwdriver. I have a larger 90-degree screwdriver that won't fit the smaller screws. So I'll do that for now, and then I think I'll just go ahead and order a new pump. You can't buy a rebuild kit for these pumps. You can only buy the whole pump itself, and it's a relatively small piece. I think it's like around $100 if you buy it from Yanmar, or $30 if you buy like an aftermarket pump. So I don't know which one I'm going to do. If I can find a good aftermarket, I'd prefer that. But the Yanmar parts are usually pretty good quality parts. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think I'll just leave it at that for now and see how much of the leak that stops, getting at least 3 of the 4 bolts tightened up. All right, so we are out sailing
checking out this motor thing. So we've had a pretty good sail today. Winds probably in like the 10 knot range for most of the time. And I'm going to fire up the motor here in a second and try to see if my fixes worked. So here we go. All right, moment of truth. Let's see if this works. Oops. Oh, we got water. Okay, I think that did it. All right, so I'm leaving the marina, and I want to wrap up this video, unfortunately, from the truck on the way home, because we just got finished sailing. I went out, my wife didn't go with us today, so I went out with someone that I met on a Facebook group for sailing in Annapolis, and we went out and had good winds, had a blast out there. And unfortunately, I'm late getting home, so I have to stop by and pick up dinner, and that's complicating things. So I'm recording this from the truck on the way home. But everything worked exactly as planned. So the strainer thing worked. We went out, sailed for a couple of hours at least, and then started the engine back up, and it worked fine. The diesel, it doesn't appear to be leaking not nearly as much diesel as it was leaking before. So I think that's mostly fixed, but what I still want to do is replace that lift pump, because it obviously has a bad diaphragm or something in there, and I want to get it before it starts leaking into the oil. But everything worked great, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up now. And hopefully this ends up being a shorter video, because I think my shorter videos get more views than the longer ones. But that's all I got for you today. I will see you folks later.